Wow, so the world turned, right? Who ever expected to be watching somebody wearing this thing? I'm going to take it off. I thought that might be a funny visual device to sort of start out what I'm going to talk about today, which is of course about how we're moving from this weird time of lockdown and stuck in our homes to coming back to work. I should probably introduce myself. My name is James Wallman. I've become a well-being expert, happiness and success expert, I would say, in the past 10 years or so. I've written a couple of books in this area. I came to it as a journalist and a cultural forecaster. I wrote a book called Stuffication some years ago, and Stuffication, what it helped to do, I think, was popularise the idea that experience are better than material things at making us happy. And as I started to research this, and what I did is I talked to psychologists, economists, philosophers, behavioural psychologists, clinical psychologists, basically people cleverer than me at universities like Stanford and Harvard and Cambridge and Oxford and the LSE and MIT and Tokyo University. And I read their papers, I talked to these people, and I started to get a picture of what you should do in order to be happier. And I built a picture of how complicated that could be. And so what I wanted to do was bring this back into something that would be practical for people. And it's the central part of a book I've written called Time and How to Spend It, published by Penguin. It was Financial Times Book of the Year in 2019, and it was in the health section. And the central idea, and why it's called Time and How to Spend It, of course, is that when you start to think about what kind of experiences should I go for, the same question is, how should I spend my time? And if you think about it, knowing how to spend your time is the most important knowledge that you could have, and using that knowledge, because how we spend our days is how we spend our lives. So if you think about the journey from, everyone stuck at home, everyone wearing masks, and wow, masks are going to be an important part of our future. As we come out of this journey, taking a break for food and for drink is going to really support our emotional health, and it's going to help us on this journey from lockdown to kind of what the new normal and what life will look like in the future. There is research from a guy called Andrew Oswald at the Warwick Business School that shows that people who are happier are 12% more productive. So if you can, nudge people to take more breaks, to go sit with their colleagues, to connect with their colleagues or someone else, or take a break and therefore go back into work more, not just energized from the fuel they've had from the food or the drink they've had, but also feeling better about who they are. From an employer's perspective, wow, you're going to get more from these people. But from the employee's perspective, from a personal perspective, you'll get more done. You get more done, life will be better. One of the real starting points for, I think, the reason why a book like Time and How to Spend It is useful is that I think some of us are not spending our time as well as we could. In fact, there's data that shows that lots of, I think it's 3 out of 4 British people don't think they're spending their time in the optimal way. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why this has come to the fore today. And one of those is mobile phones. So the average person checks their phone about 150 times a day. We're on the devices again, average is about 3.5 hours a day. And that's great, so we're in contact with, we're in contact with, our friends and our family. We keep up with the news and the football score when the football's happening. But it also takes us away from real life. It takes us away from being, for having the time to do some of the things that are better for us. So, people today complain or admit in lots of surveys have shown this, that they haven't got time to make friends at work. 8 out of 10 people say they haven't got time for dessert, which is really worrying to me, especially since I saw this other thing that said 4 out of 10 Brits said they thought that dessert was better than sex. which makes me wonder what kind of ice cream they're eating, but also makes me think, you know, look, we should have time for dessert. We should have time for some of these things. And research shows that people that spend more time hooked onto the internet, and about 60% of people in this country admit to being addicted. People that spend more time online are more likely to be isolated, stressed, and depressed. If you take, when you go for your break to have a snack or lunch, if you can, leave your device where you were. Maybe it's at your desk or your workstation or wherever. Leave your device there, or at the least turn it on to flight mode, because who needs to get you during lunch? Think of them, one of the problems with these devices is your boss can contact you there, your wife or your husband, your partner, anyone can get hold of you. Once you turn that device onto flight mode, you are free. Now, this is slightly off track here, but stay with me, because where do you charge your phone at the moment? When I ask people this, most people say they charge it in their bedroom. Now, research shows very clearly that if you charge your phone somewhere other than your bedroom, you will sleep better and you'll have more sex. You're welcome. So just think about that, though. If you bring your device into the bedroom, that's the device your boss can reach you, your mother-in-law, your whoever, people can contact you, but you leave it outside the bedroom, you can actually relax. And it's this, I say this because this is important for when you take a break at work. You go get a snack and a drink and you leave your device behind. That's like a little holiday. There's some wonderful research that looks at how we really love extraordinary experiences in life. When you do something that's really amazing, like, you jump off a cliff into water, or, the first time that you see the Mediterranean, or you climb a tree, or the first time you see your child cycle their bicycle. We remember these big things that stick out. But there's a real magic in ordinary experience as well, having a good cup of tea. I think lockdown has really helped some of us realise some of the simple things that give us real joy as well. But one of the really interesting tricks, and this is from somebody at UCLA who figured this out, psychologist called Cassie McGillner-Holmes, is if you treat something that's ordinary as kind of special in some way, it gives you more happiness. Now, her research looked at weekends, but let's say you were to consider your lunch break and you would say, this is a holiday from work. You leave your device behind, or you pretend you're in, when you go somewhere on holiday and you've got no service. At first you're kind of like, oh, hold on, I need to be able to check my telephone. And then quite quickly after that you think, oh, hold on, I'm free. So if you treat your ordinary lunch break or your ordinary break as a special break, you'll get something more from it. So most of us think that we're going to be happiest when the work is done, when we've got our feet up, we're like, watching TV, or we're on a sun lounger. We have this sort of fantasy of the good life and happiness when everything is done. But it turns out, and this is from a psychologist called Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, that's not the time when we're happiest, when we're like passive and receptive. The time when we're happiest is when we're really intensely in the moment, doing something that's really challenging and kind of tricky. So whether the great examples are when you're playing jazz in a band, or you're jumping into cold water, or you're on a bicycle and you're going down the hill, your feet off the pedals. Or you're playing tennis with a friend, or if you were hanging out with some friends and they were telling a story and you were laughing and joking. It's called flow. It's when you're really in the zone. It's when you're in the moment and you're not thinking about the future, the past, the deadlines, or anything else. You're just in the moment. But you can also get this at work, of course. When you're building something, you're making something happening, and it's challenging enough to get you into the zone. And checking your phone all the time. There's data that shows that it takes 23 minutes and something like 15 seconds to refocus again. So each time that you go check your phone and you check your email again and again, or WhatsApp or Twitter, all these incoming noises, these distractions are just not very helpful for flow. And actually on that front, so's being hungry. You know, if you've got sort of pangs of, you know, you need a drink, or you know, got that thing in the back of your mind that you want to get a cup of tea, you really need to set yourself up, because then you're going to find it much easier to get into flow. And the reasons for this are many, it's worth pointing out. Flow is great for if you want to be productive, if you want to be creative, and it leads to happiness as well. One of the simple, magical things about taking a break, to go sit and have a sandwich, or you know, a cup of tea, or have a drink, is that we tend to do it with other people. And other people are, you know, so important for our mental health and our emotional well-being. There's research conducted that looked at mortality, and I don't know if you've ever done mortality research, but it's probably the easiest piece of research you can do. What you do is you go to somebody's house, you knock on their door, and if they're there and they're breathing and they say hello, you take a tick, and then you go back and check on them 7 years later, and if they're still breathing, you put a tick again. It turns out, I mention this because it turns out that in research, there's a piece of something called a meta-analysis, looked at 3.4 million people over 7 years, and it showed that if you suffered from loneliness, there was a 29% higher chance of you being dead when the researchers came back to see you. So loneliness is, you know, this is why they come up with statistics about how loneliness is as bad as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. The longest, or one of the longest pieces of research that's been conducted in this has been running since 1939. So it's been running for 80 years now. Okay, so, you know, when the Second World War started, it's this study at Harvard that looks at people and their happiness, health and longevity. And it turns out that people, this is wonderful, it doesn't matter so much about how much you eat or whether you smoke or how much you drink. The clearest indicator for people who are going to have a happy, healthy, long life is people who have good relationships with friends and with family. So if you take a break from work to go and sit and talk to somebody, you make a connection. And when you have that sort of very simple chance to spend time with somebody else and not with your device, and you know, this is not about Facebook connections, this is about real human interactions, even if that's from 2 meters away. I think that's perfectly possible. And maybe even if you've got a mask on, you know, if you're both doing that, it's funny, right? You know, I saw a friend the other day and we kept the 2 meters, we bumped into each other in the local park and we both had masks on, and it was kind of silly, but it was, you know, it was the right thing to do from a health point of view. Now, one of the things that you may think when you think about, okay, I want to take a break and I don't want to sit and talk to anyone. There's a real difference, I'm going to flag this up here, between loneliness and solitude. There's nothing wrong with sitting and having lunch on your own as well. You know, I'm one of those people who sometimes like to socialise and really sit with colleagues that I work with, but thinking through my existence at work, there's been lots of times where I just want to sit and just get a moment to kind of just like, you know, take a bit of time and then go back into the fray. I want to bring a really interesting experiment that was conducted by some guys at the University of Chicago, and it was replicated in the UK as well, actually, from a guy called Nicholas Epley and a woman called Juliana Schroeder. And they did this thing where they asked commuters to do one of 3 things. So it was people like 7 o'clock in the morning, and they asked them to do one of 3 things. One was talk to somebody randomly on, and they did it in buses and trains and taxis as well. So one was talk to somebody that you wouldn't usually talk to. 2 was don't talk to anyone, and 3 was do what you normally do. And imagine someone said that to you. So let's say you were taking your normal food break, or, you know, 11's or lunch or something, and someone said, would you play this game? And then imagine someone said to you, okay, what do you think is going to be the reaction? What do you think the person's going to feel like afterwards? How do you think you're going to feel like afterwards? And, you know, you're probably British or Irish watching this, and you're the same as me. You'd think, look, the last thing I need on my commute or that time to myself is to talk to somebody.
I don't want to talk to them. They don't want to talk to me. Let's keep things simple and continue. The weird thing about this is that actually, if you sort of, I don't know, jump across that river and say hello to someone and start a conversation, the people that did that found they were much happier than the people that didn't. And what's also interesting is the person who was talked to. So if you imagine there's the person who's been asked to do this experiment and the person who was talked to, they found out through research is that not only is the person who started the conversation happier, but the person who was talked to is also happier as well, because there is a really deep thing inside all of us that wants to connect. The problem with loneliness, the opposite of loneliness, is this sense of belonging that's so important to us. That's why we're interested in, we're quite tribal people. We want to support a football club. We want to, feel like we belong to something. And because we're so social, when we have an opportunity to connect, whether somebody talks to us or we initiate this, it turns out that makes us happier. So, it would be great if you were to think about this and give this a try. So think about leaving your device, taking a holiday from work, as it were. You can either just put your device down, turn it onto airplane mode, and make the effort to talk to somebody and just see how it feels. We need the bad stuff to happen in order to have the good stuff. If every day was Christmas Day wouldn't be a thing. When you have a story to tell, stories set off like a domino line that leads directly to happiness, resilience, and success in life. What happens is when you tell a story to somebody is the mirror neurons in their brain fire the same as yours. It's called mirror neurons, discovered by neuroscientists some years ago. And that means that the neurons in your brain are firing the same as the person telling the story. And mirror neurons, this is what neuroscientists have discovered, are the basis for empathy, because your brains are firing the same. Empathy leads to connection. Connection leads to relationships, and relationships, as we've already looked at, lead to happiness. Happiness leads to success, as scientists have shown in recent years too. And connecting you to other people makes you more resilient. So if you tell a story, it will make you happier. Kind of magical, right? I think that's kind of magical. And what's interesting about this is there is a certain kind of story that is more likely to fire up somebody's mirror neurons. And it's a story that is told by every human culture in the world, from the Eskimo of the far north to the Yoruba of West Africa to the British, the French, the Americans. And you'll recognize it because it's the story of Star Wars, it's the story of Moana, it's the story of Jesus, it's the story of lots of Hollywood movies, and it's called The Hero's Journey. The hero's journey is where you get a hero, and what happens is something goes wrong. And after that thing has gone wrong, the hero clambers out of the hole and lives happily ever after. And on a personal level, we all recognise that story, because everybody has, failed an exam, got caught cheating, maybe, in a test at school, or maybe with somebody, or maybe they crashed their parents' car, or maybe they got fired from a job, or they got caught doing something wrong. But we have all had something bad happen and come out of it the other side. So when somebody tells a story, or where you see a story that goes in the shape of the hero's journey, you get it. And it's really interesting when you start to see the world in this way, because you can reframe your own existence in these terms, and you suddenly realize that in order for Luke Skywalker to save the universe, from the evil empire, he has to beat one baddie and another, and then beat Darth Vader. We all have to have those challenges. So for each one of us to become and to find out who we are and what we can do, we actually need those enemies. So if your boss is annoying you, or there's a challenge that's in your way that's stopping you get to where you want to get to, once you start to think about this hero's journey and this story, is A, it's giving you a story to tell somebody, and B, it's providing you with an opportunity to learn something and become something more. So as we're going through this process of, lockdown to post-lockdown, bear that in mind in those tough moments. Because when you do, you reframe life from this, I can't do this, or something's stopping me, and you put yourself back in the driving seat. And at the worst, you end up with a story, and that will bring you happiness. We all like to put on a brave face. We all want to keep calm and carry on. We can handle this. But the truth is that lockdown, post-lockdown, this time of the coronavirus, we're coming back to work now. But it's going to be an emotional roller coaster. It's going to be tough at times. And the times when you don't feel it's tough, the people you live with or the people you work with, they might be going through that too. So I think it's really important to take a break, to ease up on ourselves, to be kind to ourselves, to accept that to be the heroes of our own stories, we need those tests and those enemies, but equally we need those allies. So more of us should take more breaks. Stop, eat something, have a drink, maybe connect with somebody, because how we spend our days, how we spend our breaks, how we spend this afternoon, this morning, tonight, how we spend our days is how we spend our lives. If we get better today, then our whole life is going to be better.